In this lesson, we're going to learn how we allow users to reset their password. And it's going to work like follows. If they try to go and log in and they don't know their password, they can hit here, forgot your password, to be taken to a new view where they're going to add their email. Once they add their email, they can click to have a reset password email sent to them. They're going to be shown this view. And what's going to happen is in the email that they receive, there's going to be a link that they can click to be taken to a web page in order to reset their password. Now, it is worth noting at the time of recording, the Bubble mobile editor is still in beta, and this process for resetting a user's password may change. So check the description for this video for the latest updates. Now, what I've done in preparation for this lesson is just added a few elements and views that we're going to need here. You can check out the reference editor for this lesson in the description for this lesson, but let me just walk you through the changes. Very, very simple. We've got a forgot your password button that I've added to our login view. All that's going to do is it's going to navigate the user to this new view that I've created called forgot password. So if we go and have a look at that view, it has an email input and a button inside of it. And right now, all that button is doing is it's navigating to another view called reset password confirmation. And that reset password confirmation view is literally just there to tell the user that, hey, we've just sent you an email with a link to reset your password. And there's a button inside of this view as well to go back to our login view while resetting the navigation stack. And what we really are interested in setting up in this lesson is on this forgot password view, when the user hits send reset email, we need to add in an action here, which is going to reset the user's password. So that action lives under account and it is send password reset email. Now what we have to provide here is the email that we want to reset. That is why we have this email input on the page, because we can feed that input value into this value here. And we've got some default text that comes with this email. You can modify this as you want, but I'm just going to leave it as it is for now. And so I'm going to test this out by hitting forgot your password. I'm going to add in my email and I'm going to hit that send reset email button. And now a moment later, I've received this email. So let's see what happens when we click this button. So I want you to notice a couple of things. One, this is not a mobile app, right? This is a web page. And also we're visiting here a URL, a website address looks like this. So this is actually the website address for the web version of our Bubble project. And the fact that it says version test afterwards here reflects the fact that we are viewing here the test version of the application. Because we are still developing our application, when we ran this action from within Bubble Go, the link that it generated was automatically to the test version of our web application. And we're on this particular page within our web application called Reset Password. So I just want us to go for a second and switch to the web app version here of our Bubble project. And we don't need to learn anything about building web apps right now, aside from the fact that up here, we can view the different pages that we have within our website. Right now, we're on the index page, which is just the home page. So if I was to click preview here, I would be viewing here just literally the home page of my web app. And we've got this default page that comes out of the box with each of our web apps called Reset Your Password. And this page has a couple of things on it of note. It has a couple of inputs that behave the same way as they do on mobile. We've got a button that also behaves the same way on mobile, which has an action that when it's clicked, it's going to trigger this reset password action. And it's going to take as input values a new passwords value and the new passwords value again as a confirmation. So that's why we've got these two inputs here on the page. So this web page within the web app of your Bubble project comes default out of the box when you create a Bubble project. And this is the page that is opened when we hit this reset button. And what happens here is that if I add in a new password, then, well, on the one hand, I'm going to be navigated to the home page of my web application. So that redirect to the index page is happening because when we run this workflow, after we reset the password, there is this action that exists by default to navigate the user to the index page. One small tweak that we might want to do here is to delete this action. And I'm going to show you here one very specific web element that we can use instead, which is this alert element. And I'm going to place this somewhere on the page. We're going to leave it with this default success style. I'm going to tick this, position the alert at the top. So the alert box is always just going to appear here at the top. And this is what we're going to use to display some kind of message to the user, which could say something like, your password has been reset successfully. Please log in to the mobile app. And if you hit this preview button up here, you'll see what this reset password page currently looks like when you open it on the web. In other words, when you open it in a web browser. And notice here how we can't see the alert. So that's how alerts function. They don't appear until we explicitly tell them to appear. And so what we can do is when we run this workflow, we can add an action here to show message in an alert box. And these settings here determine how long the alert is going to appear on screen. So this is 2000 milliseconds. In other words, the alert's going to be on screen for 2 seconds, and it's going to take 500 milliseconds to animate in, to fade onto screen, and 500 to fade out. I might change the hold here to be 4000 instead. And if I just have a new reset password email sent to me, so here's the new email, I'm going to click on the link and show you what happens when I hit confirm now. We're going to see that alert on screen. And now if I try to log back in using that new password, then there I am, back in the application. Now, for us to set up this reset password functionality so that it works with our live production deployed mobile app, we also need to have a live in production web application so that users can visit the equivalent of not this URL here, this test URL, but it would be something like wonderlog.com/reset password. So this is a moment where we need to understand that we've got these two fundamentally different environments for both our web applications and our mobile applications. We've got a test or development environment, and that's the one that we've been editing to date. And that has its own database. So all of the data, the diary entries, the users who we've been creating thus far exist within this test database and this test version. Now, we also have a live or production version of our application. And this is an environment that our end users see when they install the app from the App Store. And it also has its own database. So it doesn't share a database with the test version of our application. And that's so that while we're testing, we can create dummy data while we're testing out and building our application. But once we're in production, we're going to have real users creating real diary entries. And so we've got a separate database here, a separate database environment to our development version environment. And I can show you that very quickly. When we open up our web app here, you see that I've got all of these users. And what I'm seeing here is my development database, my test version database. But I can go over here to switch to my live database. And you'll see that in my live database, we don't currently have any users. And in fact, in our live database, we don't even have any other data types either. And that's because we haven't yet deployed any live versions of our application. So what we do when we deploy a live application is we essentially copy everything in our test version into this live version, or rather we create a duplicate, a snapshot of our development version at this particular moment in time, and that becomes our new live version. Now, we're going to be tackling this properly when we get into deployment, but just right now, just so we have a working understanding so we can get this reset password functionality set up, what we want to be doing inside of our web app here is actually hitting here deploy and deploying a web version of our application out on the internet. But before I do this, there's one other detail that we need to discuss here, and it involves, if we go back to our reset password email button, it involves this action here, send password reset email. Now, the way that this action is working right now is it's not actually Bubble who is sending this email. It's actually this company called SendGrid. Here's their website. And SendGrid is a company that can send emails from one user or one company to another user or a bunch of users. And they do this through the email infrastructure of the web. So think about a company like SendGrid here as the equivalent of UPS or DHL, some kind of delivery company. What they're going to do is they're going to accept some parcel or package from a user with some instructions on where to send it. And then UPS is going to use the delivery infrastructure, right? Road and rail and air and what have you, right? They're going to use that infrastructure in order to deliver that parcel from point A to point B. So UPS in this analogy is an interface, a portal that a user can use to send something through the delivery infrastructure. And SendGrid works exactly the same way, just for the email infrastructure. So they are front desk, if you will, the interface, the post office for the email infrastructure, where you go with some email that you want to send and you tell SendGrid where you want to send it. And there's lots of these providers. It's not just SendGrid. You've got other well-established providers like Postmark, MailerSend, MailChimp, Resend, and Loops. And there's many others as well. These are just some of the most popular options. And so it just so happens that Bubble is using SendGrid to send these emails. However, this integration that Bubble has with SendGrid, it's only meant to be used while you're testing your application. Because you can think about this like Bubble has one SendGrid account that it's using for all of the test Bubble apps that are being built with the Bubble platform. And that comes with some challenges. One of the notable ones is deliverability. If one of the applications is misusing this send email action to send spam emails or send emails to email addresses that don't exist, then what they will tell SendGrid is that the entity, i.e. Bubble, who's using this SendGrid account is not using it in a very responsible way. And so they're going to add some restrictions on that account that prevent emails from being delivered. So in short, we need to set up an integration from our application directly with one of these email providers, not via Bubble's shared integration with SendGrid. And you can do this via the API connector because all of these email providers that I've mentioned have an API through which you can interact with them and ask them to send a message to a particular user on your application's behalf. Now, there is another way to handle these emails, which lives under settings and then domain and email. And what I can do here is I can actually add my own SendGrid API key into my Bubble settings. That's going to mean that whenever we use an action like this to send a password reset email, that it's not going to be sent from Bubble's SendGrid account, but it's going to be sent from my own SendGrid account. And that means that SendGrid is going to be able to reliably deliver those emails rather than my SendGrid account potentially being dragged down by all of the other Bubble apps that are sharing the same account with me. Now, for our app, I'm going to use Loops for sending emails because it's really beginner friendly and they also have a generous free plan. But there's one step that we need to set up first, and that is to add a domain name to our application. And a domain name is just this first, or what we call the root part of a website address. So the equivalent of wanderlog.com. And once we've got this set up, then we can set up our integration with SendGrid. And this also means that our reset password page will appear not with this dummy placeholder domain name that Bubble is giving us by default, but rather one that we own ourselves. So for this to work, we need to purchase a domain name. And there's many different ways that you can do this. If you just Google buy domains, then you'll see lots of different options. Some of the big ones are Squarespace domains, GoDaddy, and Namecheap. Now, I've actually gone ahead and purchased this domain from Namecheap. So this is my Namecheap dashboard. And there's some really great information about domains in the Bubble manual, which I will link to in the description for this video. And part of what we're going to be doing here together is connecting our domain. And you've got a step-by-step guide in the Bubble manual as well for doing this. So let's go through this together now. I'm going to add my new domain here and click set up this domain. And what Bubble is going to do here is it's going to provide me a bunch of what we call DNS records. Now, DNS settings can be quite a complex topic, but in short, all we're doing here is setting things up so that when an end user types in our website address, we send them to the right place. And where we're going to send them is some computer out on the internet, some, in other words, server. And every server out on the internet has what we call an IP address. That's the literal location of this computer out on the internet. And so all DNS is at a simple level is a mapping between website addresses and the corresponding IP address where that website lives on the internet. Now, again, you've got a step-by-step guide here in the Bubble manual for doing this step, but we can also go through it together now. And all we're going to do is in the place where we bought our domain, which we call the domain registrar, which in our case is Namecheap, there will be an area, like in Namecheap, this advanced DNS section, where we can add the DNS records that Bubble has given us. So it's literally just a matter of going through these and looking at the details. So we've got a type A record, which means that in Namecheap, I can add here a type A record where there is no value here for the name. The convention is to add an @ symbol. And then we just add this IP address component here into this IP address component here. And we save the changes, and then we move on to the next one. So this next one here has this value, and I'm going to do this for all of these values now. Now, once we get to these records that have a name value of www, that's simply a matter of adding in that www value here in this host column. And once you finish adding all of these records, then it can take anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours for your new website to be set up at the address. And that's essentially because Namecheap now needs to tell the whole internet where your new website lives. In other words, that when the user types in wanderlog.com, that they're sent to the corresponding server out on the internet. And you can always check your settings periodically, and Bubble will tell you when everything is set up properly. So it's been about half an hour and my domain is connected. And what that means is I could actually deploy here a web version if I add a short note. And what that's going to mean is that I can view my live site out on the internet. And right now, this is viewing my index page, which in my web app does not have anything on it. So I might want to add some landing page elements here. You have a built-in component library here that Bubble gives you that can help with this, just to quickly provide something. And what you would do here is you would add some information like track your adventure, and you'd obviously configure this however you want and have some call to action that says get the app in the App Store. And later we're going to see how we can configure this button to link to the corresponding entry within the Apple or Android app stores. But for now, we'll just leave this as a placeholder, and I'll just show you that when we hit deploy here and I give it a note, that now when I view my website, I'm seeing the changes that I just deployed. So whenever we hit deploy here, we're just copying whatever we've configured within the development or test version of our application into the live version. But most important for us is that we now have this reset password page available. And what this means is that once our app is deployed into the app stores, then this send password reset email will include a link to this live reset password page. Now, all that's left for us to do is to set up an integration with our own email provider rather than using the Bubble shared SendGrid environment, which is what is used for this action here. And as I mentioned, we are going to use loops for this integration. So we're going to set that up together in the next lesson.